I live right next to Malibu, California with my son. It's an amazing place to live. Beaches are practically our backyard, and the scenery is beautiful. But, like all things that are good, there always has to be some bad sprinkled in. Malibu has caves. These caves you can explore with a guide. Or, if you're daring enough, get a group of teenagers to explore with you and undoubtedly get lost and die. You know, like the plot of all horror movies. I've explored popular caves before, and really enjoy seeing the interior of them. Like all legends, they were once stories, tales passed on through generations, twisted with a new telling and changed with age. The thing about this legend is that for years it stayed the exact same. The whisper caves on the edge of Sydney Beach whisper to those who venture close. They whisper invitations and promises, enticing people to enter the pitch-black depths. Like most legends, those people never return. I hadn't lived in Malibu long, so when I first heard of the caves, I thought it was a complete load of horseshit. Whispering caves? God, it sounds so childish. So, I ignored the stories that seemed to circulate through Malibu. That is, until I walked along the beach with my son. Carson was born deaf. The nerves in his ears didn't fully develop, so no implant or surgery would work. We made do, and he seemed happy. He giggled as we walked through the water. As he played in the sand, my eyes wandered to the caves. It felt as if the darkness was calling me. I would never leave my son unattended. The kid couldn't hear and couldn't speak or scream to me that he was in trouble if I had looked away and he had gotten hurt. I always kept a close eye on him, but this day, as I looked at those caves and completely forgot about the 3-year-old 5 feet in front of me, I walked slowly towards the caves. I walked closer and closer until I was at the mouth of the cave staring into it. Then I heard it. The whispers. They promised all sorts of things. My son would be able to hear again. All my troubles would be gone. I'd live a happy life, no worries. All I had to do, what the cave kept telling me to do, was just walk in. Just walk in. I placed a flip-flop donned foot into the cave and started to walk inside, but a tiny hand grabbed mine and I looked down. My sun-tanned son smiled at me and placed something into my hand. A perfect sand dollar, washed in sand and perfectly white.
Come on, Dad!
He sighed quickly, pointing to the waves coming in. I glanced back to the cave, but was pulled away by my son a second later. There's a part of me that never thought I would praise my son's disability. I would never utter the words, "Thank God my son is deaf." But that night, as I was laying in bed thinking of the whispering promises, I felt myself thinking exactly that. I wondered if my son was the only one who couldn't hear those whispers. I wondered what would have happened if I had walked inside. A quick Google search got me my answer. 20 people have walked into those caves. One mother, whose 5-year-old daughter walked in, described as in a trance-like state. The mother had turned her back for a moment, turned around, and saw her daughter disappear into the cave. She didn't come out. Not even one of the 20 people that went into that cave came out. The country had tried to keep people from going in. They posted signs warning tourists about the caves, cautioned parents to keep a close eye on their young, and prohibited anyone from going inside. The signs served their purpose, though everybody on Sydney Beach wouldn't step 10 feet toward the Whispering Caves. A year after living there, my son went missing. It was a stupid mistake on my part. His cousin was visiting. She was quite older than him at the age of 11. I had left them alone in the backyard to get dinner ready. She had come inside to ask if they could go explore the beach. I gave an offhanded, "Sure." Sydney Beach was popular, and there were tons of locals that already knew about my son and my niece. I forgot to mention the Whispering Caves to my niece, who hadn't been told about them. I set the sliders on the plates and went out to the backyard with a view of the beach to call for them. The beach wasn't far, and I could see kids playing in the water fairly well. I had a moment of dad panic when I couldn't spot them among the children. My heart started pounding as I power walked to the beach. My fingers were going numb with fear as I searched the coastline. Going up to neighbors, asking if they had seen the kids, they gave me a sympathetic, "Sorry." I was close to a full-down breakdown before a woman called me by my name. "Wes! Wes!" I turned to find my neighbor across the street, Debbie. I ran toward her, taking in her shock-white face and my niece, who she was holding into a death grip. Then, my eyes diverged to the caves not 20 feet from where they stood. "Where's Carson?" I asked, though my heart knew the answer. He had gone in. And he had gone in. "I saw them at the cave. I just ran. I grabbed Sadie, but Carson, he was already inside and I started to hear them." I cut her off. I knew it wasn't her fault. It was mine. I let a deaf 4-year-old and an 11-year-old go out alone toward a cave that has claimed 20 lives. I grabbed Sadie and took her farther from the cave. The lights had switched back on in her eyes, and she was looking around for Carson.
"Where's Carson?"
"Sadie, what's the last thing you remember?" She pursed her lips.
"Carson was looking at sand dollars, and I started looking around and saw the caves. Then I started walking toward them, and I guess I forgot."
She looked back at the caves, then at me. She was completely confused, trying to figure out what happened.
I heard them. I felt someone touch me. Carson, but then nothing, and he grabbed me."
She was trying not to cry at the revelation that Carson was gone, and she couldn't remember the last 2 minutes.
He touched me."
"Sadie, look at me." She looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "Go back to the house and call for your mom and dad, okay?"
"Okay."
My brother and my sister-in-law came. I told them the story. Then my neighbors heard the story. They baked and gave me food as condolences. The whole neighborhood had heard the sentence. "Westcott's boy walked into the caves. Westcott's boy had walked into the caves. Westcott's boy had walked into the caves." And that's all they needed to hear. No one walked out of those caves alive. No one came out. My son was dead. A week. I believed my only son, my only child, was dead for a week. I was numb inside and out. I wallowed in guilt and general depression for a week. I thought about him in there. I knew he was immune to the whispers, but for all I know, that cave was a maze. He could have gotten lost and either died of dehydration or simple exhaustion. He was in the pitch black, blind and deaf for a week. No way he could have survived. I woke to a knock at my door at 4 a.m., the 7th day he'd been missing. My brother's family had stayed with me, and Sadie has always been a light sleeper. She woke up with me, and we both trudged downstairs to see who it was, The first thing that seemed odd was I couldn't see anyone out the window of the door. I shook it off as drowsiness. I unlocked the door and opened it. Sadie squealed with delight and started screaming his name.
Carson! 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 Carson's home!
She screamed into the neighborhood. It took me a good 10 seconds to fully grasp that my son was alive. My son was standing in front of me. I squeezed him so tight, he wiggled in my grasp. I planted kiss after kiss on his head and hugged him again, though slightly less constricting. By that time, porch lights had been turned on and people had come to see the commotion.
It's Westcott's boy, Carson! He came back!
That's how, at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday in May, one street of Malibu, California erupted into cheers and applause. I asked him what happened later. Everyone wanted to know. At first, he didn't do anything. Just stare at his hands for a bit.
It was bright.
He signed. Bright?
There's a light that dance. The light showed me the way.
He signed. What he was saying made no sense. But I still asked. Did you get scared? He nodded.
The bones scared me.
The bones? What do you mean? He looked up and stared into my eyes.
The bones. The people that got lost.
You saw the skeletons? Carson nodded and picked up a Lego dinosaur. He placed it in his lap to sign.
There's a place where you can go 2 ways. The light said to go 1 way, but the bones pointed another.
He tried to explain.
I went to the light because the light made me safe. I followed the light and I got home.
Carson finished, pretending to eat a Lego man with his Lego T-Rex. Buddy, were there a lot of bones? Carson nodded.
Lots. I can't count that high, but I can count up to my fingers.
He said, showing me all 10 fingers. He saw 10 human skeletons in that cave. 10!
I don't want to talk about them. The keys are bad, Daddy. Bad.
He says, suddenly getting teary-eyed and bursting into tears. I mulled over his words and hugged him, trying to make sense of what he was telling me. I never did ask him about it like that again. Once in a while, he'd come to me saying the odd sentence like,
The light talked to me.
or
The bones pointed down.
weird sentences that didn't make much sense, though they must have made complete sense to Carson. It wasn't until he was 8, years after his disappearance, he came up to me with his tablet and showed me an article. It was a list of all the people who had gone into the caves and hadn't come out. 8 children and 12 adults. Carson pointed to the list of children, then back at me with fear in his eyes.
Dad, the kids aren't dead.
Hey guys! It's Sugarcane here. I just wanted to thank the author, the musician, the artists, and the editor that worked with my channel. None of this would have been made possible without you all. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And remember, don't get a sugar crush. It may be deadly.